Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and Indian Army Chief's statement against Pakistan. What prompted both these officials to make such highly provocative statement against Pakistan?
India has attempted for 24 years to misrepresent the freedom struggle of Kashmiri people as terrorism. India, despite deployment of over 900,000 armed forces and law enforcement agencies, have failed to suppress and eliminate and extinguish the burning fire of freedom of the Kashmiri people.
Pakistan, over the last many years in the past, whenever India made such baseless allegations against Pakistan, asked India if it has any evidence of any terrorism, but India failed to present anything.
Trying to divert public attention at home from the embarrassment of failing to quell and silence and extinguish the freedom struggle of the Kashmiri people. I think such provocative and misleading statements by the Indian Defense Minister and Army Chief needs to be seen in their embarrassments and their attempts to divert public attention from their failures. Pakistan's concerns are no longer Pakistan's unilateral concern. These are now increasingly global concerns that India is using terrorism as a policy instrument, not just across South Asia, but at a global level.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello and welcome to Program Insight in V News English. Dear viewers, Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and Indian Army Chief General Upendra Singh made two separate statements accusing Pakistan of supporting terrorism. These both top Indian officials also accused Pakistan of running terror camps in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. This prompted Pakistan to take strong exception to the statement of Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and Indian Army Chief's statement against Pakistan. Pakistani Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a separate statement, followed by a strong-worded statement issued by Pakistan Army's media wing, Inter-Services Public Relation, in which the allegations of Indian Army chiefs were turned baseless and provocative. And instead, Pakistan reminded India that it is actually India which is promoting transnational crimes and terrorism, not only in the region, but beyond the region. To discuss this all and all associated aspects, that what prompted Indian Defense Minister and Army Chief at a time to make such highly provocative statements, we are joined by extremely senior analyst, strategic affairs expert, international affairs expert, Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali Sahab. Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali Sahab, very warm welcome to Program Insight in V News English. I'll just begin and I will seek your immediate comments. What prompted Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, followed by statement made by Indian Army Chief? Most of the content of these two top Indian officials were focused on Azad Jammu and Kashmir. And Pakistan took strong exception and rejected this. But initially, I wanted to seek your comments. What prompted both these officials to make such highly provocative statement against Pakistan?
Thank you, Mateen Saab, for inviting me on your show. I think before I give you my comments on what caused Indian Army Chief and Defense Minister to issue such statements, I think it is very important to clarify before our international viewers that since 9/11, India has attempted for 24 years to misrepresent the freedom struggle of Kashmiri people as terrorism. Whereas it is very important to clarify that according to international law, UN Charter, as well as law of armed conflict, according to all these statutes and international law, any people or community which is living under foreign military occupation have a right to defend themselves, their property, their life, their honor through armed struggle against foreign occupation. And that is something which international law recognizes as a international legal right, and an Indian attempt to misrepresent this as terrorism is divorced from international legal realities, number one. Secondly, your answer that what prompted Indian political and military leadership to level such provocative statements regarding not just terrorism, but also expression of desire that one day they seek to take military control of Azad Jammu and Kashmir as well. I think are two dimensions to it. In fact, three dimensions to it. There's a political dimension, there's a diplomatic dimension, and there's an economic dimension. Let me first start by economic dimension. The economic dimension is such that you are aware that India is spending more than 10 times more money of its taxpayers on its defense and military buildup. But despite deploying almost 900,000 armed soldiers and men in Indian occupied Kashmir for the last 35 years, it has failed to suppress the freedom movement of Kashmiri people. Now, this creates a huge economic compulsion for the Indian military leadership and defense minister in order to justify such a huge funding. I mean, if you put this into context, India is perhaps the fourth largest defense budget in the world, and it is failing to suppress the freedom movement of the Kashmiri people despite its military occupation. And there is a ratio of almost one Indian armed soldier per every 10 Kashmiri person. Such a heavy deployment has failed to extinguish the burning desire of freedom by the Kashmiri people. That is the first thing. So there is an economic compulsion on Indian military to justify that such a huge expenditure on military needs to be there in order to sustain itself. Secondly is the political compulsion at the domestic level, that the Indian defense minister and the army chief needs to pacify and justify before their over 1.4 billion Indian taxpayers that their money is not being spent on development, improvement of life, health, and education, but on suppression and oppression of peaceful Kashmiri people. So that is the political angle, that how do you politically justify such a huge expenditure, not on self-defense, not on national security, but on oppression, suppression, and state-sponsored terrorism against the Kashmiri people. And the third angle is the international angle, the diplomatic angle, that you are aware that in the last 1 year, number of Indian plans to carry out targeted killing and assassination of their political critics who are based in Canada, US, UK, and Australia have been carried out with the approval of the highest authorities in India through its intelligence agency. So that is something which has dented the Indian trust in the eyes of the Western powers and damaged its goodwill. And in order to divert the Western and international concern and attention from this reality, such misleading and provocative narratives are an attempt to divert public attention. But I don't think it will work.
Dr. Saab, you rightly said that it may not work. In statement, Pakistan Army, which issued a very strong worded statement, it reminded India that there is a Kulbhushan Yadav in the custody of Pakistan. How India forgets Kulbhushan Yadav, which has made several confessional statements that he was involved in carrying out subversive activities in Pakistan. So, do you think by making such statements, Indian Defense Minister and Army Chief can deceive the world?
I think it's a very important question, Mr. Heather. I think the international community, the International Court of Justice are well aware of the reality that it is an Indian senior military officer who was caught and found and arrested in Pakistan after he accepted that he was sent on a state operation, a state mission to divert, direct, plan, execute, facilitate, and support the terrorists operating in Balochistan from other countries. So that is an evidence before the entire international community. Whereas in case of Kashmir, there is not one single evidence that India can present before international community in support of his allegation that Pakistan is supporting terrorism in Indian occupied Kashmir. But the most important and embarrassing reality is that India, despite deployment of over 900,000 armed forces and law enforcement agencies, have failed to suppress and eliminate and extinguish the burning fire of freedom of the Kashmiri people. And in fact, the more oppression and suppression they carry out, the more human rights violations they carry out, the more violence that they carry out, it further energizes, invigorates, and inspires and convinces the Kashmiri people that their future does not lie with India. And secondly, it is also very important that Pakistan's army chief and foreign office have reminded India of three stark realities. Number one, that every action based on state-sponsored terrorism and oppression further strengthens the resolve of the Kashmiri people to seek freedom as per Indian own promise at the UN Security Council, as per UN resolutions. Number two, any military attempt or adventure from India will be responded immediately, swiftly, and decisively to ensure every inch of territory and every drop of blood is protected, and any such action is met with a very resounding and strong and befitting response. Thirdly, I think the international community must not ignore this fact that despite its spending of almost $80 billion on defense, despite its acquisition of high-tech weapons, despite its huge arms build-up, India and Indian military continues to play with fire by stroking such provocative statements, despite the reality that Kashmir is the only region which is surrounded by three nuclear powers: Pakistan, China, and India. And any misadventure can lead to a grave situation which can cause serious threats and challenges to not just regional but international peace and security. And lastly, it is also very important that the Kashmiri people who look up to the international institutions for peaceful resolution of the Kashmir dispute, they deserve the attention and the promise by the international community and the United Nations that was made more than 7 decades ago um, right at the request of the Indian delegation which took it there, that the only enduring and and the solution to the Kashmir issue lies with the right of self-determination being granted to the people, and the use of force and military occupation is not a substitute, not a solution, not a alternative acceptable to the Kashmiri people, to Pakistan, and to the international community.
Dr. Saab, I would like to speak specific your comments and response on Indian Army Chief who said 60% of the alleged terrorism in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir emanates from across the line of control. But Pakistan, over the last many years in the past, whenever India made such baseless allegations against Pakistan, asked India if it has any evidence of any terrorism, but India failed to present anything. Your comments.
Indeed, Madeen Saab, I think, as you rightly mentioned, the case of Commander Kulbhushan Yadav, which is actually an evidence that India deployed its senior intelligence officer with the specific mission and task to promote terrorism in Pakistan. In contrast, India has failed to identify even one individual who could be considered involved in terrorism in India or Kashmir. Secondly, there are three reasons why this allegation is ridiculous and unjustified. Number one, there are 900,000 Indian armed men and troops in Indian occupied Kashmir. If an individual or a few people continue to use force against Indian armed forces, despite such a huge, exceptional deployment, then this is again an evidence that their professional excellence is despicable, and their professional standards are really poor, that 900,000 armed men cannot prevent the actions of a few individuals. Secondly, the entire line of control is barbed, constantly watched and monitored. So if despite it, the entire line of control being barbed, we are having barbed wire, having cameras, having drones, having night vision devices, still people are able to allegedly cross the line of control, then that is again an evidence of the poor professional standards of India. Number three, I think there are frequent reports of firing across LOC, and which is an evidence that a very heavy military deployment by Indian Army is across the entire length and breadth of line of control. And they carry out unprovoked firing incidents across the line of control into Azad Jammu and Kashmir, killing poor civilian Kashmiri brothers and sisters, and sometimes killing and maiming animals as well. If that is the situation, then how can an individual or a few people continue to cross with impunity over the last 35 years? What is that 900,000 armed men doing in Kashmir if they fail to prevent such incidents? But I think the reality is that they have completely failed to oppress and suppress the freedom struggle of the Kashmiri people, which is indigenous. Pakistan reserves the right and considers it as a responsibility to support the Kashmiris' right of, their plebiscite and right of self-defense. And in that case, Pakistan continues to support it diplomatically, politically, morally, and will continue to do so in future as well. But the right of the Kashmiri people to raise arms in the self-defense of their life, property, and honor against armed foreign military occupation of India is a UN and a international legal right recognized according to international law. or international law of armed struggle, which India cannot misrepresent and construe as terrorism. Therefore, in order to divert attention from its own failed operation to kill and silence the critics across the world, including in the territories of its allies, particularly US and UK, after getting exposed that they were trying to kill Sikh critics, and also trying to divert public attention at home from the embarrassment of failing to quell and silence and extinguish the freedom struggle of the Kashmiri people. I think such provocative and misleading statements by the Indian Defense Minister and Army Chief needs to be seen in their embarrassments and their attempts to divert public attention from their failures.
Doctor, a very important development would be taking place in Washington. That means change of new political administration. What do you think new political administration in Washington after 20th of January, what will be their policy towards South Asia? Keeping in view such statements, do you think South Asia, India and Pakistan will remain in the attention of United States? And quickly linked with this, do you think such Indian statements are meant to seek American attention?
It's an important question, Mr. Mateen. I think Mr. Trump is returning to White House with a very heavy agenda on his plate.
Exactly.
He has a lot that he'll be dealing with both at home and abroad. He comes with a very extensive revamping plan of trying to completely revolutionize how the US conducts statecraft. He wants to completely revamp the State Department, Pentagon, CIA, White House. He's bringing new faces. He's bringing structural changes, and a lot of people in the US administration and the government itself are waiting with bated breath. Whereas in case of international issues, Mr. Trump has promised some very drastic changes in its foreign and defense policy, particularly towards Russia, particularly towards China, particularly towards Europe, particularly towards Ukraine war, particularly towards the Middle East. And I think in view of this, he'll be very busy in these affairs. Whereas South Asia is concerned, I think two things will continue to remain in American interest. First is the lingering issue and the rising issue of terrorism. It was a Republican administration, Mr. Mateen, you remember very well when 9/11 happened.
True.
And the US decided to punish Afghanistan and Afghan Taliban after it was attacked in September 2001. And again, Mr. Trump, again, a Republican president is returning to White House at a time when global and regional terrorist organizations have again re-established themselves in Afghanistan. So I hope in his attempt to protect the US homeland from great power politics, the Trump administration does not neglect the revival of global terrorist movements. And in that context, I think there's a prospect of cooperation between Pakistan and the US. And I think John Kirby made I think an irresponsible statement today from the White House in the last week of the Biden administration when he ignored the historic realities of close and long-standing treaty partnership between Pakistan and the US across the last 7 decades.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So this neglect of history is yet another mistake which I hope Mr. Trump and his new incoming administration will correct in the US own interest. Secondly, there is a growing concern in India that despite being a close ally of the US, it will face the wrath of the US sanctions regime and the tariff regime. And the Indian industry and traders are really worried that despite being a security partner of the US, its economy will pay the price of heavy tariffs being imposed on imported goods. I think these are some of the realities that Indian traders and businessmen will recognize, that despite being a close security partner of the US, when it comes to economic interests, it will be treated no differently from other countries, including China. Whereas in case of the US, I think there is a growing concern that after the discovery of Indian intelligence operation inside US territory in an attempt to kill and assassinate political critics, which was raised by not a government organization, but the Department of Justice. Exactly. Which means that this was not a political discovery. It was based on legal evidence. Now, these realizations have made the US look at India in a more realistic manner. And the evidence of that was that Mr. Biden was invited as the guest of honor by Modi administration on their Independence Day military parade. But Mr. Biden also declined to attend that because he did not want to pay tribute to the Indian military, which is involved in assassination of the US citizens inside US homeland territory. And that is a concern which I think will perhaps grow during the Republican administration. So on both ends, I think there are evidences of problems emerging both in the economic and security and intelligence cooperation between New Delhi and Washington, which are deepening both in Washington and New Delhi. And I think those people who considered US-India marriage against the common threat of China as a foregone conclusion deserve a reality check.
Lastly, I'm so grateful that you've already spent that of time. What options are available with Pakistan? Although strong-worded statements were issued separately by Pakistan Army and Pakistani Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So in order to expose this brutal Indian face of terrorism, what Pakistan should do beyond issuing statements?
I think it is very important that Pakistan's stance and diplomatic stance and strategic narrative on India must be consistent and global. It should not be situational, occasional, and event-based. Secondly, I think Pakistan must recognize that India deserves the credit of being the pioneer of terrorism in this region. It takes pride in its support for Mukti Bahani and creating a militant outfit which led to the creation of Bangladesh. It's actively supported and interfered in the politics and policies of Bangladesh, which the new administration is now recovering from. There is active historical evidence found in US serious academic work and historical records that India sponsored, trained terrorists belonging to the Tamil Tigers against Sri Lanka. It supported Dalai Lama against China. It is supporting BLA and BLF and TTP against Pakistan in Afghanistan. It was found involved in the assassination attempt of key royal family members of Nepal in an attempted regime change. It recently was discovered only 2 weeks ago, and it was disclosed by the leading US newspaper, Washington Post, that India actively attempted to bribe at least 40 members of parliament of Maldives in order to overthrow its government, which was not welcoming the Indian military presence there. So all these historical realities prove that India is a source of terrorism, political destabilization in all its neighboring countries. And that is something which all neighboring countries have realized. But more recently, some of its strategic partners and allies in the West are also discovering. So I think in the days to come, there are opportunities for Pakistan, that Pakistan's
Exactly.
concerns are no longer Pakistan's unilateral concern. These are now increasingly global concerns, that India is using terrorism as a policy instrument, not just across South Asia, but at a global level. So these things create opportunities for Pakistan to highlight these realities with facts, figures, and research at important forums. You know very well, your friend spoke to you recently that Pakistan has been re-elected as the non-permanent member of the United Nations
Exactly.
Security Council, which provides
Exactly.
Pakistan opportunity to share these realities and experiences with the global audience in order to promote global peace and security and save the world from the threats that India increasingly pose to the world community.
Thank you so much indeed. And I would like to conclude that it's factually based on the fact that it's basically India which is promoting transnational crimes, terrorism, subversive activities, and there is opportunity for Pakistan to tell to the world, to the international community about the real terrorism face of India. Thank you once again, Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali Saab, for sparing time and speaking to Program Insight in V News English and sharing extremely informative, insightful analysis of the things in South Asia. And dear viewers, till our next program, goodbye and Allah Hafiz from studios.